people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. It was very recently announced that Whyte would be returning late next month against unbeaten American up-and-comer Jermaine Franklin. And on the undercard of that fight, we're going to be seeing Sandy Ryan. Sandy's going to be making her ring return, attempting to come one step closer to the winner of McCaskill versus Cameron. This super lightweight contest, this super lightweight bout, is being billed for a WBC silver title. Silver. A step in the direction of the full title that Chantel Cameron is currently in possession of, but is up for grabs when she shares the ring with Jessica. Cindy's going to be taking on Magali Rodriguez, who sports a professional record of 21 wins, 6 losses with 2 draws, to Sandy's 4 wins with 1 loss, and no draws, 2 knockouts. Magali's a lot more experienced as a professional than Sandy. She's got experience working for her. She has that on her side. But it's size that she's lacking. Sheer size, overall size. Magali Rodriguez, as experienced as she might be, normally she hovers around 122, 126. Super bantamweight, featherweight. That's where she normally campaigns. But in her last fight, she was campaigning as a super lightweight in her last fight against up-and-comer from La France, Victoire Pitou. She was campaigning as a super lightweight, and she actually beat Victoire Pitou for what was the WBC silver title, hence warranting this contest. What it's all about. Getting in position to challenge the winner of Chantel Cameron versus Jessica McCaskill. Magali, unfortunately for her, she has something that Sandy Ryan wants, the WBC silver title, which can be used to get her in position to challenge the winner of that fight, the winner of Cameron versus McCaskill. So while Magali Rodriguez may have a lot more experience on her side, experience is on her side more so than it's on Sandy's, while she's got that working for her, one thing she ain't got is sheer size. She ain't got size on her side. Sandy Ryan is a very big super lightweight. Sandy Ryan, who saw action 3 times last year, 2 times already this year, the Erica Farias fights. The first one that took place in March and the rematch that took place in August. This will be Sandy's 3rd fight this year, her 3rd fight. Sandy Ryan suffered her first professional loss at the beginning of this year, back in March, and I believe that was a blessing in disguise. I believe that losing that fight, dropping that decision to Erica Farias, being caught out there, caught by surprise, that's the wake-up call a young, talented fighter sometimes needs. Not all of these fighters that are opposite the ring, not all of these girls are going to lay down. Some of them are tough nuts to crack. And you're going to have to find some other way to win. Up until that point, the sheer size and power, ferocity of Sandy Ryan was enough to overwhelm the girls she had fought so far. But Erica Farias was a far cry from those girls. A former champion and one of the toughest, most accomplished fighters the country of Argentina has ever produced. Ahead of that Sandy Ryan fight, Erica Farias was coming off of consecutive losses. She had every reason to lose that thing, but she didn't. And this is what I mean, that under those circumstances, perhaps Sandy, then unbeaten Sandy Ryan, perhaps she thought it was going to be easy. And it turned out to be anything but. Hell, even I thought she was going to stop Erica Farias. Even I thought Sandy was going to knock her out, but that wasn't the case. Erica Farias, she wouldn't lay down. There's a valuable lesson in there for Sandy Ryan. I think that loss to Erica Farias earlier this year will help to make Sandy an even better fighter than she was going into that first fight. It might. She tried to overpower Erica Farias in the first fight, and she used her length and height and movement to win the second. Sandy's not just a physically imposing, statuesque puncher. She does come from a very good amateur background, and she won that fight. She won that rematch using her boxing.
So what do we need to know about Magali Rodriguez?
Well, Magali Rodriguez of Mexico has only had 1 fight in the last 2 or 3 years, and that was earlier this year in June. Victory over Victoire Pitou, we talked about. I'll say that I don't think she'll get as much resistance from Magali as what she got from Erica Farias. Erica Farias has a lot more experience at super lightweight, than Magali does. You know, Erica was a champion here after all. Fought the who's who fighters at 140 pounds, whereas
Erica Farias has never been stopped. She's never been knocked out in a boxing match, you understand. She's fought some punchers, some hard punchers, but nobody's ever been able to knock her out.
Whereas Magali Flores, she's been stopped 2 times.
Essentially, this is a different fight than an Erica Farias fight because Magali Flores, experienced fighter that she might be, she's not as experienced as a super lightweight as Erica Farias was, and Erica Farias has proven to be a more durable fighter over time than Magali. So this may be an easier fight for Sandy Ryan than the Erica Farias fights were. Preliminary thoughts. Sandy Ryan may not struggle with Magali as much as she struggled with Erica.
And because Magali, unlike Erica Farias, because she's been stopped before, stopped at lower weights than super lightweight, it's conceivable that Sandy Ryan might rack up another highlight reel knockout.
Look for this on the undercard of Whyte versus Franklin late next month in November.
Reference to that card, Dillian Whyte's ring return. You know, I really like that. In spite of being knocked out in his last fight, the Tyson Fury fight, Dillian Whyte's long-awaited shot at the green belt at the WBC title, in spite of that, he's returning to action in the same calendar year. He's returning to action.
Not taking the rest of the year off so he can sit around sulking and feeling sorry for himself.
Need I remind you that Dillian Whyte has effectively changed his decorum. He's now based out of America, and he's got Buddy McGirt in his corner. This is a solid choice for a fighter on the bounce, a fighter on the rebound, unbeaten American up-and-comer Jermaine Franklin.
Jermaine, who we all know hasn't competed at the same level as Dillian Whyte. He hasn't shared the ring with guys like Oscar Rivas and Robert Helenius, Derek Chisora,
Joseph Parker, Alexander Povetkin. Young Jermaine Franklin, an unbeaten up-and-comer, he hasn't fought those kinds of people, though given the circumstances, that's where the sizzle lies. That's what creates the intrigue. That even though Dillian has fought far better fighters than Jermaine has fought, Dillian's on the bounce. Dillian's on the rebound.
Is Jermaine Franklin catching him at the right time, or will Dillian's overall experience be enough to see him through this?
And what kind of Dillian Whyte are we going to get now that Buddy McGirt is in his corner?
You know, I've long maintained that Dillian is sharper than he's given credit for.
When I think about how both he and his domestic rival, Anthony Joshua, they're both on the bounce. They're coming right off losses in their last fights. You know, Dillian was knocked out in his last fight. He got stopped, but that didn't stop him from returning to action in the same calendar year. Whereas when it comes to Anthony was supposed to be coming back in December, and they have since called off those plans. Now he's supposed to be coming back early next year.
But you see what I mean, that Dillian got stopped in his last fight. He got knocked out. And he's coming back sooner than Anthony.
Anthony didn't get knocked out. He didn't get stopped. He didn't get stopped in either of those Usyk fights. In his last fight, he dropped a decision. Yes, he dropped a decision, but he wasn't hurt, wounded, battered.
It would have been nice to see the guy close the year out in the winner's bracket with a W.
That looks to be what Dillian Whyte is set to do, try to do, and Eddie Hearn has since declared that Anthony's next fight could now be a rematch versus Dillian Whyte in January or February. Hearn said he thinks Whyte is probably the front runner if he beats Jermaine Franklin in November. Otto Wallin is also an option for Anthony.
That doesn't communicate strength. That doesn't communicate confidence.
I really hope they reconsider. I would rather see Anthony Joshua rebound off those 2 losses to Alexander Usyk against a fresh face, somebody that he hasn't fought before, somebody like Otto Wallin. Otto, who gave Tyson Fury, quite famously, a run for his money. The ideal fight for Anthony Joshua's ring return, as far as I'm concerned, is Otto Wallin, not Dillian Whyte again.
It's not that you can't do the rematch. You can do the rematch. You can do a second fight between them, but not straight away. You do it under these circumstances.
Feels a lot like you're trying to take a stroll down memory lane, revisit your old stomping grounds in what you presume is a more controllable situation than what else is out there. You know, because Anthony fought Dillian before, beat Dillian before, he knocked him out.
He wouldn't be in unfamiliar territory with that fighter.
And if you stick him in there with Dillian while he's on the bounce, while he's on the rebound, it doesn't exactly communicate confidence. It doesn't exactly communicates strength. I mean, I don't think people want to see that fight just yet. That rematch. For all the same reasons Tyson Fury versus Derek Chisora lacks sizzle.
Let Dillian Whyte get himself back in the winner's bracket. Let Anthony do the same thing. And then let those two boys face each other sometime later on next year. Don't do it straight away.
If Anthony is returning in either January or February, you know he just fought a southpaw. One of the trickier southpaws in the entire sport of boxing. Otto Wallin is a southpaw, but he's nowhere near as tricky as Alexander Usyk.
And Anthony wouldn't be in unfamiliar territory with Otto. Not exactly. Those two guys fought each other in the amateurs.
For my money, Joshua versus Wallin has more sizzle and more intrigue than Joshua versus Whyte 2. Now is not the time for that fight. Now is the time to remind people what Anthony Joshua can do. And if he goes in there and stops Otto Wallin where Tyson Fury could not,
that sends the right message. That sends the right message to the division. That sends the right message to the boxing community at large.
You know, I think about Dillian Whyte returning to action before this year is out and how Anthony isn't. I think about Dillian Whyte's corner situation. He's enlisted the aid of Buddy McGirt. And I think about Anthony's corner situation and how...
Doesn't seem fluid to me. Doesn't seem cohesive. For my money, I actually like Dillian's corner, at least right now, more than Anthony's.
Just seems like Dillian's corner has more stability than Anthony's. I don't even know what his corner situation is going to be moving forward. Will he continue to work with Angel Fernandez and Robert Garcia?
They need to hit the ground running next year.
I've said it before, and I'll say it here again. There's no shame in Anthony dropping a decision 2 times to a fighter the ilk of an Alexander Usyk. There's really no reason to hang his head in shame over those 2 losses. There isn't. But
he needs to be more active. The last few years, he's been fighting once a year.
I'm telling you, previous eras of boxing, boxers themselves were a lot more active than the guys these days. And you're not going to be sharp on a schedule like that. Not as sharp as you can be. The more you do something, the better you...
The more you do something, the better you are at it. But when you've got these long spells...
Pockets of inactivity, fighting only once a year for the last, 2-3 years, that doesn't help Anthony's situation. I think this is a fighter who's at his best, at his sharpest, when he's active, when he's getting out there on a regular basis and knocking people out, because Anthony Joshua is one of the stronger finishers in the entire division.
I don't want to see him go into a Dillian Whyte rematch straight away. Let Anthony take on Otto Wallin.
Provided Dillian Whyte takes care of Jermaine Franklin. And Anthony, he takes care of whoever it is he ends up fighting next. Provided that it all happens that way. Barring injury or unforeseen circumstances, you stage a rematch between Anthony and Dillian afterwards.
But not straight away. There's no demand for a rematch between Anthony Joshua and Dillian Whyte, though perhaps they can create one in their next outings, depending on how they look.
How they perform, since they're both on the bounce, both on the rebound. People want to see what both men have left, and if they show the people that there's a lot more left in the tank and that there's a lot more to do,
and suddenly a rematch between them becomes more attractive for either the spring or summer months.
And just in keeping with the theme of all things heavyweight, Derek Chisora, ahead of his upcoming fight with Tyson Fury, says Joshua couldn't fight Fury due to complications with sponsors, promoters.
Most level-headed fight fans understand that you cannot hope to negotiate a fight that size carrying on the way that Tyson Fury was carrying on.
AJ is living in Tyson Fury's head rent-free, Chisora told Sky Sports. Tyson wakes up every day thinking about AJ and cannot do an interview without mentioning AJ. AJ is off, living his life, doing his own thing. I don't know why Tyson keeps talking about AJ. Chisora's career is guided by Joshua's management company. He explained that Joshua is not to blame for the talks with Fury falling through. Chisora places the blame on numerous factors that neither Fury nor Joshua could control. AJ could not take the fight because there were so many complications with sponsors and promoters.
In a situation that isn't quite cut and dry, it takes time to sift through all those details, and they are important details, more important than the average fight fan realizes.
It's not impossible, you understand. It's not impossible to negotiate a fight under those circumstances, but it does take time. More time than Tyson Fury was willing to allow. After all, he's the one that put all the time constraints on that thing. He's the one that set the deadlines.
If the shoe was on the other foot, and the roles were reversed, and it were Anthony putting a Monday deadline and subsequently a Wednesday deadline on negotiations.
If it were Anthony putting all these time constraints, quite publicly I might add, public time constraints on negotiations while the two teams are attempting to negotiate this situation behind the scenes, if it were Anthony doing this...
Wait, why would Anthony be doing this? That's the better question. Why would anyone who wants to get a fight this size over the line behave that way while the two teams are trying to iron it out?
Why would you even do that? In what way is that conducive towards getting the fight done when you know it's not your run-of-the-mill voluntary title defense and you know that this is not your run-of-the-mill fighter? You can't hope to negotiate a fight with someone of Anthony Joshua's stature pretending and telling yourself that he's just Joe Blow now, that he's some nobody.
It feels like Tyson Fury's public campaign for a Joshua fight was more about humiliating Anthony Joshua than actually making a fight with him.
The fighters always want to fight, just fight. But the complications come from the business people around them who get in the way. The managers and promoters get in the way. They make it difficult. Even this fight and contract was a headache, stressing me out. People always think making a big fight is easy, but it's always such a headache. And bear in mind that Tyson Fury actually gave Derek Chisora more leniency and more time to make a decision than he gave Anthony Joshua, even though the Joshua fight is exponentially bigger than this fight.
Tyson Fury himself said that he doesn't think he'll ever fight Anthony Joshua because they're too difficult to deal with.
And a little over a week ago, I remember somebody on that side saying that Eddie Hearn and Anthony Joshua's egos are too big to box as part of someone else's show.
Maybe that's your problem. Maybe you're trying to negotiate that fight on the premise that he's just Joe Blow and he doesn't have corporate sponsorships and endorsements.
Maybe your problem is that you're not realistic. You don't want to accept who you're dealing with. You're dealing with a guy that doesn't need you or your green belt to fight for a title or even fight in a big fight.
You can't negotiate with Anthony Joshua the way you negotiate with a Derek Chisora, the way you negotiate with a Otto Wallin or a Tom Schwartz, at least not right now. I give a fuck what you think about his boxing.
I can care less what you think about him losing to Andy Ruiz or him losing to Alexander Usyk. Here today, he's still not in a place to where he's just some nobody. That's why so many somebodies have his name in their mouths, because underneath it all, they know this guy's the cash cow of the heavyweight division, at least for the time being.
At least right now he is, and on the face of it, it seems like Tyson Fury wanted to negotiate on the premise that what? Anthony's desperate? He needs a title shot badly, and you're the only way to get one?
That he has to bow down and bend over to Tyson Fury and play ball on all of his terms. Otherwise, he has no route to an alphabet title, no route to the bag, no route to the money. Is that what you think?
If he were a lesser fighter, all he'd have to do is fight as many Francesco Pianettas, Sefer Seferis, and Tom Schwartzes.
All he'd have to do is keep busy with those guys, the same way that Tyson Fury kept busy with those guys. All he'd have to do is fight guys of that ilk and wait for the division to thin itself out. That's if he wanted to do that, but he actually went into negotiations with you, and it's you guys that screwed the pooch, not them.
What you guys want to do is make it their fault in front of the eyes of the boxing community. You want to say that it's Anthony's fault that fight didn't happen, but it wasn't Anthony putting time constraints on that thing. It was Tyson Fury.
Sooner believe that all of that was a failed attempt at humiliation, a humiliation tactic, than an earnest effort to get a fight done, because you don't get a fight that size done that way. It just doesn't happen.
And Frank Warren, old fish eyes Frank Warren, he's been in this business long enough that he knows that.
Or he should know that. You're not dealing with your run-of-the-mill fighter.